Hello everyone. So today we're going through the third of the fourth agreements. So if you haven't watched the first or the second one, the first one was be impeccable with your word. The second one was don't take things personally. Third one is don't make assumptions. And again, I mean, these are all hard, but that's why it's a focus. That's why we have to work on it. That's why it's a practice. Because we naturally, it's our brain. It wants to make assumptions. It wants things to make sense. Our rational reasoning brain is constantly trying to make sense of things. And so when things don't quite make sense, then we fill in the gaps however we can. And often it's just with like hypothetical assumptions. And then even though it might not be true, we go with it because that feels safer than having all these unknowns. Our brain likes structure, it likes consistency, it likes that. So just know that that's part of the issue, is that it's what our brain is wanting us to do, but it's not always the thing that serves us the most. And I hope that you guys are seeing that theme. Is like we shouldn't have shame with some of these obstacles that present themselves for us as human beings, because there's an evolutionary reason for it. There's a biological, there's a mechanical reason that these things occur. It's our job, though, to be aware of them so that we can transcend. The biohack is a big word right now. So we can hack into our system and not let it be manipulated or used or unconsciously being the driving force behind our action. Instead, we have that awareness. We can be mindful and present and see what's really going on so that we can choose a different path that's not based in conditioning that was put in place hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So anyway, so the assumption things, we often make assumptions and we then label them or just believe that they're true. And then it can be very hard for us to change our mindset because of different brain mechanisms where it's confirmation bias, and it's hard to change our mind sometimes. So we see this a lot with like teenagers or younger kids too, that the imaginary audience and those things that can occur. But we as adults do it too, where we assume that people might be doing or thinking about us. And then we can take it personally. And then we can say things. We're not impeccable with our words. See how they can feed off of one another? So we can create a lot of emotional poison, or those viruses, by making assumptions. Because when we do that, it typically then becomes a narrative. We think certain things about a certain person or situation, and then it becomes like a dividing force between us. A lot of times it's because we don't have the courage to ask questions, to get more information. Sometimes it's because we really want, for whatever reason, we want to believe the worst in people. And we have to be willing to look at that and to know that that's going on, because we're not seeing things clearly. We're playing tricks on ourselves, and it's only hurting ourselves and another person in a relationship, which usually affects more people. So we have to be willing to see, like, am I making assumptions because I want to believe, or I want to see the worst? I don't want to see that person being a good person or doing good things. I want to see them. I want to fill in the blanks with some negative things, because that's going to make me feel a little bit better. We have to be able to have those hard conversations with ourselves first. And then if it's something where things just aren't really making sense, like it would be easy for me to make an assumption right now about a certain situation that isn't probably a good one. So I might need to ask more questions, or I might need to get some clarification. And that's not always easy. Those might mean hard, brave conversations, but they're so worth it. Because then you can have a different understanding. Maybe then you get the truth, and it's something where I'm like, well, we need to work through this because this isn't good. Or something I have to come to terms with too. But at least it's out there. Then you know exactly what you're dealing with. And that's going to be powerful too. When you think about like relationships, or like with a partner, your family, at work, how many times do we, whether we realize we're doing this or not, just expect the other person to be our mind reader and to know what we want? whether it's a gift like for a holiday, or if it's a work project, or we want somebody to help us clean the kitchen, and then we basically set them up for failure because they can't read our minds. They can't. And no matter how long we've been together or how much they know or should know what we want, they can't. And so then we're like assuming that they don't do stuff or do stuff because it's like we take it personally, right? But we can't do that. Like, they can't read our minds. And so we have to be able, like, also then it becomes a story where we're like, well, they never do that. They never help me. So then it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy that way. Relationships, partnerships, families, all of that, you can get into a pretty nasty cycle of doing this when we're making assumptions. We're not speaking clearly. We're not asking for clarification. We're not like finding our voice and asking what we need, or asking for help. That's always a big one too, right? So we have to be able to do that so that it's clear. Brene Brown talks a lot about clear is kind, unclear is unkind, about how, like, if we want something or we expect something, we have to be clear on what those things are. And the other person is appreciative of that, because then they're not like, oh, okay, now I know. Still, it's up to them. They get to choose if they're going to do that or not, or how they do that, or if they don't, however it looks, right? And that's on them, but at least they know. So then it just makes it's just very loving to have that open and honest communication, clear boundaries, clear expectations, and to move forward that way. You're going to minimize the need for our brains to fill in the gaps with assumptions. And that's going to just be healthier for everyone. So when we can get to a place where we ask ourselves, am I making assumptions? Am I being able to, or am I seeing this clearly, or am I filling in the gaps? My brain's doing this. We can start to communicate much more clearly, because we're not going to want to cling to that. We're going to understand that that's not in our best interest to do those things. We're going to choose a different path. And that means we're going to be brave, and we're going to have hard conversations. We're going to ask for what we need, knowing too that that's all we can do, is we can give that gift of just speaking our own truth, and you feel better about that. Whether or not it's given in return, that's something else. But to know that we gave them that gift of the clearness of what we're looking for, then things can really move forward in a very loving, productive, and evolving way. So check in with yourself and just make sure that we're giving people the benefit of the doubt, instead of always just going to worst case scenario with people. If that's the case, if you find yourself tending to believe the worst in people, just explore that. Don't beat yourself up over it. What's that about? Get to the bottom of it, and then move forward, and you're going to feel better, and your relationships will shift.